All right. So one thing that I'm really welcoming people into sharing is to just tell me what you noticed in the exercise with the hands and what you noticed when we expanded that to the body. We can also ask questions about what I just said, which may have been difficult to understand. Any way we want to go, we can go.
Yeah, I think that was helpful, Mark. The holding the hands, and then gradually losing the sense of the outline or the definition of the hands. I've had that experience too when my hand is resting on my leg in meditation and I start to sort of lose track of where my hand stops and my leg begins. And
Exactly.
yeah, no, that was helpful to me.
And did you see the space? Or not see is not the right word, but did you notice the space that appears with that?
With holding the hands.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I did. No.
yeah. You're welcome to try it again on your own. You know that as that sense of contour, as what the mind created part of hands. As you start to like unlearn that, as it fades a bit, and you lose the contour of your hands, you lose some of the substantiality of the hands. You actually come alive in a certain way as movement and vibration and feeling in a different way when you lose that sort of perception. There's something we do when we create a hand out of that sensation is we kind of dumb down a little our ability to feel it because we don't need all that extra information. It's kind of, I think, the way the mind works is, okay, I got it. There's a hand there. I don't need all that extra information that's being produced. But so when you relax the contours of the hand, you get a whole lot more information coming from that hand. And it seems less substantial. And instead of being a hand out there, it's just vibration and form in a space knowing it. And so your attention is actually the space of the hand. If that makes sense. Typically, what we do is we put the attention somewhere back here, looking at the hand down there, so we locate that and we think that we're like, even with our eyes closed, we're kind of looking down there in space to something out there. And yet it's all consciousness. It's all awareness. And we've just located ourselves somewhere back here where the eyes would be in that whole kind of thing. So that's the shift. And please be patient with it because it's not at all a natural thing for human beings to do. We're very much oriented to objects that are useful to us out there. And so this kind of stepping back and getting to a much more basic level of what things are doesn't come easily to us. We're conditioned away from it.
So you mean that that's where consciousness is? You're talking about the sense door of feeling arising with the sensation of feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's a classic Buddhist way to say it. That the knowing of feeling arises with the feeling. And it creates its own sense space with the feeling.
Yeah, that's too hard.
Anyway, it never has appealed to me, that classical way to put it. The way that I find is that sort of beginning to realize that, you can do this, is that it's not like consciousness is in here looking out there. The very fact that I know color and shape and form out there is consciousness. What I'm looking out into is consciousness. This boggles people's minds. From a scientific perspective, sometimes people get it. that it's all in the brain. It's another way to put it, if you want to be a materialist about it, which I'm not. But it's your brain that creates this room that you're in. It's this brain that creates this guy who's talking to you. It's not, it's not already there in your consciousness. It has to, something has to create it. So it's kind of mind-boggling to think that, this whole thing that's around me exists because of consciousness.
But that sounds more like perception. Like you're saying that we're interpreting the molecules as having certain structures and adding up to something that makes sense. That sounds like perception to me, not consciousness.
Yeah, no, we don't have direct contact with molecules. I'm talking about the direct experience of moment to moment life. You are in an ocean of consciousness. And, if you can't see me, I guess. I don't have my thing up. But if I'm pushing on the wall here, the actual experience is one of pressure. The mind creates the solidity. And even from a scientific perspective, the solidity isn't there. It's actually all space. But, I'm not talking from a scientific perspective. I'm talking from a yogic perspective of what is the actual experience of the world is, it's made up of, solidity is really just pressure. When you touch your hands together, what you feel is pressure. And that's consciousness. That's a conscious experience. We're not taught to think this way. We're not taught to notice our experience this way. But it's very much the meditative kind of path is to begin to look very directly at something as simple as breathing, something as simple as the body. In fact, you don't need to go beyond the body to recognize it, to begin to recognize that that all of this exists through knowing, through conscious knowing. All experience. Speaking of experience, I'm not talking about something beyond experience. All our experience is through conscious contact with different elements. Is this helping at all? You're looking puzzled. Yeah. It may take a while. I often kind of tell people in my class to relax. If I don't say anything that is strange or, not something you've ever considered before, then maybe I'm not doing my job, to bring you to new places. So let this kind of rest a bit. And in my experience, this kind of beginning to notice space it's like something has to wake up inside a bit. It doesn't, when we've conditioned the mind to just seeing objects, it takes a while for this other thing to kind of like wake up to seeing itself, to seeing space, and to seeing the consciousness that is space. It takes something kind of waking up to it in the mind. And it's not a pure act of will. And so in a way, it's easier to teach people to just like direct their attention to objects, because we do that really, really easily. I can say, notice the breath, and everybody knows what to do. But it's not so clear when we point our attention to the formless. The formless space is pretty formless. it's kind of empty. It doesn't have a form. It's where form appears. Form appears in space. The form of the hand appears in space. And it is also space itself. So that's hard to see. The formless, even though the formless makes possible this very world that we're in, makes it possible that we have experiences at all, is the formlessness, which right now I'm calling space. But actually, when you notice space enough, you'll begin to see that it's actually the space of consciousness where everything is known. It's the same thing. So and it's a little bit like finding that there's another standpoint in the mind. There's another shore to stand on in the mind, rather than the me in here, it out there standpoint of kind of ordinary conditioned kind of consciousness. It becomes possible to be like sitting as awareness with different forms arising and passing within it. Just sitting as the stillness of awareness with forms arising and passing within it. The thought form arising and passing within it. The sensation of the body arising and passing within it. It becomes possible to step into a different kind of stream of experience if you begin to go in this direction of unlearning concepts, unlearning this sort of solidity of perception that we have learned to create in our world. Anyway, hang in there, Elizabeth. And anybody else who's struggling with this right now, it's not easy. And those of you who have been with me for a while, I occasionally broach this with people because I think it's important, but it's also sometimes people don't get it, and that's fine. So Yasmin, you have your self unmuted. Go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I had a couple of things I wanted to say. One is when you tonight in the meditation, when you said something like drop into your body as if you've never been there before or for the first time, it came to me like, oh, I don't know if I'm really in my body. Like I suddenly had this feeling like I wasn't necessarily in my body anyway, and it was so like fleeting. And then I kind of got scared, like, oh, maybe that, I shouldn't like go there because, that's what happens when you die, right?
Well, not only when you die, as you discovered, it's possible to not be in your body.
So that was interesting. That's never happened to me before. And the other thing that often happens in meditation is, especially with the body scan, there's a point at which the shape of I lose a connection to the shape of the body. It more and more feels like it's just this blob of different sensations that don't have a real, like my imagined, form of the shape, like of my hand or whatever. It's just like this like jelly or something,
It's not clear how it all goes together.
Yeah.
It's partly, I think, what is helpful for closing your eyes is because often it's your eyes that give you this sense of, oh yeah, it all fits together the way I see it. You close your eyes and you're actually enter into the actual felt sense of the body, not so clear, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just have one more thing. I've been working with, I cut my news consumption to about 20% of what it used to be, because I noticed that I had this underlying like feeling of fear or anxiety that I didn't know like I couldn't put my finger on why I have this fear, underlying. And so that helped that subside a lot. But I've also been looking for spaciousness, as you suggested, not in the night sky, because I'm really not a night person.
You're not a night person.
But
It's cold out there.
During the day, the sky, and looking for other, spaciousness. Just bringing it to awareness throughout.
Great. Yeah. Because we are, we're not separate from our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like every creature on this planet, we are not separate from our environment. And so putting yourself in that under the sky, it has an influence.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just wanted to comment on those things.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And by the way, it's okay if you don't know where your body is when you're meditating. There's some people for whom the body disappears when they meditate. In this tradition, at least, we're encouraged to look for sensation and to come into the body. But that doesn't always happen. Some people, in their meditation, sometimes the body disappears. All right. Who else? Brenda.
Hello.
Yes.
I really appreciated when you suggested to go outside. We have a hot tub, so I'm gonna go outside. Here for me, because I perch myself in front of this view that we have outside to my birds, to the hills, and it had become a awareness of mine that I get so fixated on what I'm hoping to see, what I'm seeing, like trying to identify birds, that like it's has become like not an enjoyable thing, because I'm like so trying to construct what I'm seeing. And so I love this whole notion of go outside and look at the space.
Mm-hmm.
Like look between the things.
Right. It's not about the things.
It's not about the things. So I'm really kind of excited to kind of play with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when it comes to birds, again, it's like something in the mind wants to like name what they are and categorize them. And so even just unlearning that a bit to just see form in space. As a bird is flying, there's a form and it's in space. And it doesn't, you can kind of detach a little bit from, I've got to know what that is. I've got to be able to identify it. And you may see it with very different eyes.
Yeah.
With fresh eyes.
Yeah. The other piece is I remember maybe one of the first classes I did with you, maybe it was this time or the last, when you said to try not to visualize like the body parts or whatever as you are guiding. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's so intriguing. And so I've been playing with that. And I do this other Kriya meditation where it's like you're supposed to visualize it coming in your head and out through your third eye. And so I'm experiencing with it just being sensation and not being kind of like a mental task and not having to kind of to visualize it, I guess, to be thinking, but
Yes.
just, yeah. And you can kind of, I'm experienced, I can kind of do that. I'm like just being in feeling and sensation instead of visualization, which I didn't even realize. I thought, I'm realizing now visualization for me is a thought. Yeah.
It is. It's a different use of the mind than feeling, and just being and feeling. You know, there's a reason to develop that. There are various meditations that do that, but this is different. And just the felt sense of the body as form in a knowing space. You know, I'll tell you just, how can I put it this way? It's like, it's possible to watch a bird flying in the sky and realize that it's not outside of what you are. That the beauty of it is not outside of you. That the knowing of it is what you are. The knowing of that beautiful bird flying in the cerulean blue of the sky, you know, or whole flocks of them leaving a tree and kind of circling and circling and then landing on the next tree and then flying off and circling, you know, that is within your own heart. It's not outside your heart. And it once struck me how when I feel the beauty of that, it's because my heart is open to it. And it's not outside my heart what's happening. You know? That it's a very different experience than kind of me in here looking out at that out there experience. So give that a try in your hot tub out there. You know, warm and cozy in the water. See if you can just realize, because it's really a realization, it's not just an imagination, that what you're perceiving is not outside your heart. Not outside what your heart is. I like that. That somehow says it a little better than I think I've said it so far tonight.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah.
So let's see. Laura.
Hi.
Hi.
I really appreciate this inquiry, and I also am noticing it's very hard to stay with the experience and not get very intellectual. You know, it's
It
very
is,
intellectualized, like we're talking about an experience. But one of the things I appreciate about this is that it's one of those things that, like, you know, wise people 5,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago figured this out. And then neuroscientists sort of catch up with it, you know, and say, we discovered that everything's connected, or that like solid things aren't really solid. They're all moving around, and, you know, liquids are solids, and, you know, and then there's a part of like, yeah, we know, we figured that out a long time ago. And I feel like this is kind of one of those things, you know, I see occasionally articles and something like the New Yorker where they talk about consciousness and the seat of consciousness, and that it's really just what you're saying, that it's that we have these constructs that make us feel like we know what we are, but it's all an illusion. And I just find that so interesting that, you know, that it takes, that we think of Western ideas and science as being so advanced, but that non-industrialized, you know, scientific cultures figured this out a long time ago.
Through direct intuition, not empirical method.
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, it was empirical, right? It was direct inquiry,
It was
but
through experience, yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that. I find a little humor in it. But it is also validating when you read some of those articles, if you understand it, that they're really pointing to the same thing.
Mhm.
But anyway, sort of intellectual, and I'd like to, get back in when next time I'm meditating. I'd like to really keep going with this exploration of the sensations and the understanding of it falling away, our template of what it's supposed to be.
Exactly. You have to do the practice right in the moment.
Yeah,
As
exactly. But
yeah.
I will just add that, I work with young children who did not have a safe attachment, and they don't know their arm from their elbow because they didn't have a mother to hold them and say, this is an arm and this is an elbow and this is and there's a high misery quotient, and they're really, really dysfunctional sometimes until they can get want what they need. And so, even though we're sort of frustrated that we have all these rigid templates, you can't do very well without them from the start.
You
And then you have to unlearn them, right?
They're tools. And see, sometimes you need a tool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You need to know that this is your hand.
You need to know that this is your hand. It's very handy. No pun intended.
And you need to forget it. Yeah. Anyway, thanks.
So anyone else? It's a bit of a paradox because we're trying to put words to something that's really beyond words. When you were, feeling your hands, and I can name things like pressures, but you actually can put your attention into a pressure. You go past a place where there's any words, where we've named what that experience is or can adequately describe it. Go right past words. I'm aware that when I instruct you meditating, I say things like notice the breath as if the breath were something, as if it were this solid, identifiable something. I have to point you toward the experience. I have to use the words, but the words can be deceptive. So when you're with the breath, as I have to say it, you can unlearn or let go of breath as any idea about what's there and see it for the first time. That's really what deconditioning the mind is seeing things for the first time. That's what a deconditioned mind is able to do, is kind of unlearn, back away from the patterns that we have learned to see. Remember Joseph Goldstein talked about going out in the night sky and trying to not see the Big Dipper. After you've been told that there's a Big Dipper there and you've been shown the kind of outlines of it, and you do that for a while and you get rewarded for looking up and being able to show where the Big Dipper is. But meditating is a bit like going out in the night sky and not seeing the Big Dipper, letting yourself unsee a pattern that you've been told is there. And that is, in a sense, there, but it doesn't actually exist in space. There's no Big Dipper. It just is an apparent kind of pattern from Earth that looks somewhat like a human object, but it's not actually there. So that's a bit what we're doing here in terms of attending to the body. Is I have to say body parts, but your inner vision doesn't have to be stuck with those perceptions. You can go past it to something more basic and come into the flow, really, of experience as it's actually lived beyond concepts. All right, let's see. Diane, go ahead.
Just a quick thought. I do love science, and I think there's one little example that I think sort of demonstrates, at least in my experience, reminiscent of what we did tonight. So if you're learning to draw something, we often sort of our left brain is saying, you know, that's an arm, but if the arm is pointing towards you, you have to take away that notion of what an arm is. But there's a wonderful book called Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. And you can
Oh, yes, it's a great book.
you take a known object and you flip it upside down, or you take a photograph and flip it upside down, and it takes away your story. And it takes away that left brain telling you what the object is, and you just drawing what you see. It kind of reminds me of, you know, letting go of the story. There's also a great meditation where you're learning about sound and how to listen to something without the story, you know, if it's a dog barking or whatever it is. So it just makes me think about turning off the switch to the left side of the brain, I guess is how I'm thinking
It's another way to look at it. Yes. Yeah. The left side of the brain is supplying these concepts. And in order to draw an arm, you have to not see an arm. You have to see what you actually see. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great example. And a great book I'd recommend to anybody. And by the way, I do love science too. I'm not, not anti-science, but you know, what I'm teaching here comes more out of the yogic tradition than out of science. All right, Mickey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about a lot of things in terms of constructs, and I actually think I know what you're talking about, which amazes me. But then I have this question, is consciousness a construct?
Is consciousness a construct?
Hmm?
I mean, any idea we have of consciousness is one. And what it is kind of a mystery, I have to say. So is consciousness a construct? That's a great question. Yeah. The knowing quality of experience. Is it directly perceived? I think it's pretty directly perceived without a concept.
But when we talk about it, we talk
Every time we talk about it, we turn it into a
it
concept.
becomes a concept, right?
A concept, absolutely. But if you take a moment right now to notice the knowing quality of experience, it's pretty immediate.
Mm-hmm.
That red on your, what is it? Fleece.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an immediacy to the knowing red that, you know, obviously we've named it red and differentiated from orange and so forth. And that in certain ways is conceptual, but there's an immediacy of knowing, for example, the knowing of that, the knowing quality. Anyway, I don't know. We could probably kick this around, but that's a good question. Thank you. All right, everybody, we're at our time.